Welcome to the Regenaissance Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Griggs. Visit www.theregenaissance.co to learn more. So my name is Ryan Griggs. I'm the host of the Regenaissance Podcast. And today alongside me is Justin from Santa Carota Beef. Thank you for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is really exciting.
So I guess to get started, well, actually, before this, you mentioned what Carota even was, because I essentially assumed it meant carrot, but if you want to explain that.
Yeah, so Italian is, they're not, in Latin, Docus Carota is, it means carrot. And then in Italian, it's Carota. And the Italian restaurants we sell to absolutely love it. We've had a few like Italian retail, like awesome delis. They love jumping into this thing because it's so fun to say and talk about. And we'll get into it, but the actual texture flavor of it, it's just like beef used to taste. It really is. So, but yeah, Carota, we kind of just came up with our name on a marketing scheme. Like we had a marketer, we went back and forth with everything. And this is the one that kind of really stuck and we love it. It's not like a band name that you named 10 years ago and you wake up and you hate it. Like this is something we still love it, still fight for it every day.
Yeah. So I found you all on social media from a video that was shared, I think, on LinkedIn about the fact that you all use carrots as feed. So I guess before, because I've never, again, heard a ranch or farm ever do that before. So I'm curious, leading up to that, did you all, from whenever you first started, was that like the goal, or how did you even get to that?
Well, I'm going to just rewind this thing back to the Dust Bowl. My grandfather, his family came out in late 30s, early 40s. He was a kid of the Dust Bowl. They had no money. When I say out, they came to California. They were from Minnesota. And they ran out of money, ran out of gas in the desert, found like a wad of cash in the parking lot as a kid, got him to Bakersfield, California. They lived in a tent till they were about 12, and then he had to leave the tent because his parents couldn't feed him. And he ended up he called her the school teacher, but she had a horse ranch too, room and board, and maybe $1 a day. But he learned horses and he learned how to shoe horses. And there was this old timer named Clyde Parker, and he picked him up to shoe a pack string that he was running. And he essentially just took him on and adopted him from the time he was an early teen. And from there, they had a horse ranch up in the mountains, traded horses, and it was converted into a cattle ranch later. My grandfather went to the Army. He was kind of an outlaw the whole time, and he was a fireman too. And he was really good with heavy equipment in the mountains. And so wildfires were his thing. Wasn't stuck in a station, and he was chasing fires like chasing wild cattle. And so at the same time, the fire department helped subsidize the couple cows that they had. And one time he tried to buy a stack of hay from Bill Bolthouse, which is Bolthouse Farms now. And it was then. And eventually he said, well, can you grow some hay for us with our recycled rinse water? This is probably 1987, 1988. And also, what can you do with these cold carrots? And this was a small little vegetable processor at the time. And we were feeding cows in the back of the plant, in the back 40. I remember being 3 years old, riding around on a 3-wheeler, irrigating stinky hay fields in the middle of the night because the recycled water is a little different. They wash the carrots for a couple of days, and when the water gets too dirty, they'll send it out to the back and they can reuse it. Not for human food, only for cattle feed. And so that kind of grew, but as the plant grew, I come from the town of the invention of the baby carrot. So when baby carrots were invented, and the trial and error, there was just ebbs and flows of waste carrots, too big, too small, and then now, the tips, tops, and pieces. And so we essentially had to lease and purchase ground all around the carrot facilities. Our ranch is 8 and 10 miles from the two biggest carrot producers globally. And so we built it around there to where big semi trucks could literally drive into the foothills and spread carrots, and the cows would come eat them. So thousands of acres, and then always fresh deliveries of carrots. So we did like cutter cows, which are older cows. Cows lose their teeth when they get older. And then some of them would have babies, and we kind of started a cow herd as we grew. And then we would feed our stockers, or the calves that we wean. So let's say 500 or 600 pounds, we could take them up to 800 or 900 pounds, and then they would go to a feedlot. Well, a few years ago, probably 8 or 9 years ago, we were dealing with the drought, and my dad and I had a big carrot contract with Bolthouse, so I had all the cull carrots and anything I couldn't sell to the dairies or make pet food out of. We were making bred heifers because no one else had grass, but we had carrots to make pregnant females. We always had like a handful that didn't breed or aborted, that just couldn't get pregnant, and those we were losing money on. And we'd heard of guys like finishing, but once you hit 1,000 pounds, you're kind of at the point of no return. The animal value on the commodity market really starts to dip.
Can you, I guess, elaborate just a little bit more on that for?
Yeah. So for a corn finished animal, the feedlots want enough time to convert the orange fat back to their white fat, because it's a little bit, not a lot, it's a little bit yellow. It's from the beta carotene. We would get discounted for too much carrot fat because of the water in them. But come to find out what the carrots do, because carrots are like almost 90% water. So if a cow's going to eat 20 pounds of grain, then to get the same amount of dry matter, it's got to eat 200 pounds of carrots. But they love it. They come running off the hills for it. And so, and the calcium phosphorus, it balances perfectly. They do great on it. Very healthy for them. And so, once we get past that, it was like the point of no return. So we did one and then like 10 or 12 behind them as like a sample run. And the first time we ever ate it, we had like a local butcher do it. And we ate it on my birthday in April of 2017. And we were like, wow, this stuff's good. And then it was like, oh man, we really got to go to work. So that was kind of the beginning of the end, as far as the old ways. And what we found out, and thank God for podcasts like this, social media, the big packers, they would discount us for the carrots, but the market, they love the idea of it. So where before we were this newer, I'm third generation, there was 7, 8 generation ranches out there. They've been working with the same feedlots, and it worked for them. So when you try to define sustainability, you couldn't, because they're sustainable. But once we showed the world, like who we are, what we're doing, and it's so out of the box, the end market loved it. And so, we looked at where a lot of ranches had tried to sell their own meat before, where they failed. And we really learned that everyone wants to sell a steak, and it's easier to sell a steak, but that's only a third of the animal. We have stew meat. You can make ground beef into a lot of this. And if you can sell ground beef and lead the charge with that, then the steaks will follow. And so we ended up with a really great burger chain. There's one here in Austin, one of the locations, called Eureka. They're awesome guys. There's like 25, 26 locations in 5 or 6 states. They keep growing every year. And then we were able to go jump on the steak side of things. And on the steak side, we ended up in... we had a couple different distributors, and one of them pushed us on the win. And at the time, the way the story was relayed to me was JBS had a grass-fed product, but it was like corn stalks and soy hulls. So it was all the grain, but not before it grains, right? They were really, and then they went in there, and then they had like a national price increase, and they just made the menus. You want to piss a chef off? Cut a deal with them, he prints the menu, and then raise your price. That is no. So like part of, and I love this because part of like the cowboy code of ethics is a handshake's the deal. You do what you say and you mean it. And so we went in there and set prices. They loved us, loved the story. Our ranch is 4-hour drive from Vegas. So we ended up with a whole film crew doing like a 3-day photo shoot. We were in the Win magazine. And then the gal who wrote the article for the Win sold our story to Food and Wine. And so we went digital like that same year on some Food and Wine articles. And we really started to grab some momentum. And that was probably, it was before COVID. So 18 or 19, it was 19. And it's still like selling at a loss, trying to just make it work, but we're committed now. And
we were selling at a loss.
Yes. This is hard to do.
Yeah. So can you explain? Because this is one of the many reasons why I have podcasts and Regenaissance as a whole is the economics of agriculture, because it's interesting. So for example, I'm having Alexander Family Farms on my podcast too. And I made a post on Twitter, and a lot of the comments are about asking them when will they have glass and stuff like that. And I just know the answer is just economic related, because folks just don't understand how tough this is. So if you can explain why you
well, to go into food service, there's like a 21-day limitation if they want to hold your feet to it. And a lot of them do. So you have 21 days to move the product out of the packer. That's pending that the packer gives you 21 days to move the product. A lot of places that you pack with, when you harvest your cattle, they might want it out that week. You have to have a home for your product immediately. And so if you don't have the product sold, it's going to mess up your cash flow. Or if you have your steak sold, but not your burger, your trim, what do you do with it? And then you have to fill the contract the next week or the next month or whatever your set timing is. You end up long on product. And so the balancing of selling the whole animal at a profit is one of the hardest things to do. And the packers luckily they can move whole loads to big retailers. They have huge outlets. And where a smaller guy, to just get started, you better have a lot of freezer space, and then you're selling out of your freezer, which is fine. But to get above and beyond that, I think farmers markets are great. To scale them, how many employees you're going to have. I love the shipping concept. It's really hard too, because you don't know when you're going to have orders. You might be making 30 boxes one day and 0 the next. So it fluctuates so much on people's needs and demands and when they order that, man, my hat goes off to anybody trying to vertically integrate and get their own private label beef to the market. It is one of the hardest things to do. And I truly believe that our supply chain isn't set up for it. And so to enter into the supply chain as a small producer is very difficult, very difficult. And people who buy local and buy from a single source beef company, like, I tip my hat to them. I think that is the way to help this movement is to support, just to purchase the product. That is the first step. If you're going to eat meat, eat it from a local rancher, know where it comes from, because that's how we get to kind of, I hate to say disrupt the supply chain, but we get to really carve our niche into how we get there. Because so long, the beef industry, as it's pegged to a commodity, just pegged to the dollar, and it's built on efficiency, which is great, but it's so efficient, there's no room for the little guy to jump in this massive stream. I mean, you're like trying to ride a bike on an 80-mile-an-hour interstate, and it is so hard to do. So my hat's off to anyone to do it. But when you get to these 1,000-pound kind of semi-soggy animals, what are you going to do with them? So you're at the point of no return, and we finished a couple, we ate some, got in with a great distributor. They couldn't move it all. We grabbed another one, and that's kind of when we grabbed the win. So we finally broke even around February 2020, because what do you do with the product, right? You need to cash flow. You have to buy more animals. You have to pay for feed. So there are times in the beef industry, and it happens a lot, that you sell at a loss. And I hate it, and it sucks, but it's either that or sit on the product and bet the come. And that may never happen. So we finally broke even. And then March of 2020, we turned our first profit. And then the next week, COVID hit and shut down all of our customers. So that was, it was brutal, It did give our cattle time to grow on feed. We learned a lot about how far we can push them, about they start really turning it on again, 22, 24 months. And so we got to see them really push back to that and get into the bigger frame yields. But at the same time, we had no money to feed them. I remember in April during COVID, everyone was so worried about, the frontline healthcare workers. And so we got a bunch of our friends and family and we barbecued a bunch of beef ribs, and had a barbecue company that we were selling to bring out salads, utensils. We made beans, and we literally called the radio stations and had them go to all the hospitals, and they delivered dinners to the nurses and their families because we had nowhere to go with this product, And so we wanted to just do something good and be part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So they started opening up again after a few months. We were able to really grab Eureka because they shut down to 5 locations, takeout only. And so it was like this big gorilla that you have to fight, but it stumbled, And so, all right, we jumped on them. And then as they slowly opened, we were able to be their exclusive provider. What we didn't take into account was all the patio space that got built during COVID. So their capacity extended, and man, we were cranking out numbers like we've never seen. And it was good. And then in California, man, the governor shut it down again. And it was so hard, and it was just detrimental. I remember when they made that announcement, we were down in Los Angeles. I have a daughter with special needs. She's 6 years old now. She essentially was born when we started this like uphill battle startup. So we've been fighting a couple battlefronts the whole time. And we were getting really good therapy for her down in Southern California. That closed during COVID. And my wife is just like beside herself. Like, we're all this money into it. She's never going to walk, going through all the mom thoughts. And we brought up one of the best therapists that was at this special needs, like, physical therapy center. And she was still working for the other company on Zoom because they shut the center down. And then between sessions, like, she was working with us. And she went back when they opened, hated it, quit. And I sold a piece of property that I was saving for, like, my kids' college fund, sold it, and we started a physical therapy center right in our hometown with her with it. Found out we couldn't be owners because we're not doctors, and that's the way it's set up. Well, my accountant's wife was a speech therapist for the schools. So we had this awesome combination of an accounting firm where we could do payroll, we could do medical billing, we had speech, and now we have this awesome pediatric therapy. And so within the first year that we launched like January of 2021. So this all happened really fast. And January 2021, we launched, and the first year we had 10 kids never talk, 10 kids never walk. Like, it was happening good stuff. But when we had gone back, I'm going to back up. When we had gone back to try the old therapy session is when they announced that. And we had all kinds of boxed meat, and we had nowhere to go with it. And so I'm going to try to parallel both stories. All right. Yeah. And so I remember it was right before Christmas. So we're building the therapy center. And like rainy days, we're putting furniture together and desks and little chairs for physical therapy for these kids. And at the same time, I would go to the cold storage and all the restaurants that were still open just to try to stay alive. And it was like under protest. I would go drop off a box of meat. I was literally and I filmed it, and I'd never filmed myself. And so I would not going into the places, but before, and I was just like, hey, I'm going to pray over this thing, and we're going to God bless these people. I remember walking into one of them, and they told me, and I knew the owners, they said, Justin, they want us to close 2 weeks before Christmas, and our employees won't get their last check before Christmas for Christmas presents, and their unemployment won't kick in yet. So we have to stay open. So we were just dealing with all these stories. But meanwhile, the ABC, the Alcohol Beverage Commission, they were shutting down liquor license for anybody who was open, because that was the only thing that the state could strong arm. So as people were messaging me on social media, I had to tell them, email me, please, and we'll make a list, because every time you guys say whoever's open, these people are following us. And it was like cat and mouse for weeks. We were trying to help all these restaurants out. And so we ended up with this huge list, and we brought a couple pallets of meat into the barn, and had our community, literally friends and family show up. We pray over these pallets, and I gave everyone a dispatch list, and they would go drop off meat, and we covered almost all the restaurants in our hometown as far as taking care of them. You know, it was kind of a cool deal that we were doing to help, because at the end of the day, the restaurant workers, those are our sales reps. That's who sells our meat. They're either selling chicken, they're selling fish, or they're selling beef. And so the more we could help them, the more that they're going to give back. I just feel like they're out there working their butt off, and people are doing whatever they did during COVID, and they were having to deal with it. And so we were happy to give back. So meanwhile, we launched this therapy center, and my wife's working the front desk, hated it. And she's collecting money from like special needs moms, breaking her heart, right? Because she knows what it's like to scrounge pennies to come up with these huge bills for physical therapy, but there's results. And there is nothing like a parent that sees hope. Like a parent that sees hope for their child will fight till the bitter end. They will sell everything they have to. They will do anything. And so I have a friend of mine, and his uncle said, look, we would like to donate to like a foundation. And so we don't have a foundation. It's like a doctor's office. So he said, if you start one, I'll put some money in. So we started one, and we raised money for some kids. And the first year we tried to do like this giveaway on Christmas, and we had enough money for like 4 kids. We had 600 applications. You want to talk about cry your heart out. You go through 600 applications of parents begging you and telling you why their child deserves like, you know, a 3-week intensive treatment more than another one. It's heartbreaking. My oldest son, he was probably 10, 11 at the time, and he did it for a couple of days with my wife and my mother-in-law, and it was gnarly, but they got through it. We ended up doing, I think, 6 that year. And then now we're doing, you know, 20 plus a year. We're really, and Christmas morning is so awesome. Calling these parents and telling them like you're selected and your travel's covered. Like you are going to go, like your child's going to get a chance to go to the next step here and get some awesome therapy. That's been so amazing. And honestly, like when you have a kid, you got 18 years to prepare for them to get out of the house. When you have a special needs child, you have about 18 minutes for it to sink in, suck it up, go through the grieving process, and make a plan on how the hell you are going to live and thrive the same way. And so us being able to find these independent therapy centers and different resources and connect parents to it, as well as fund some of them, man, like that's God's plan for us, and we're going to stick to it. We'll saddle up and ride it out. Like, I don't care if that's our plan, that's our plan.
I can only imagine how much more motivation and drive you have, especially for Santa Carota, than providing healthy, good quality meats for your community.
Right. I think our timing's good. Like we're believers, God's timing's perfect. And I feel that there is a movement out there. My kids aren't vaccinated. And that's been a struggle in California. We just moved to Texas 3.5 weeks ago. I packed my family up, moved them out here, and for awesome therapy for my daughter. But look, all the opportunities. Like I wouldn't be sitting here with you had we not. And so we're just kind of following the dream of where we're supposed to be. I have plenty to do here. We have our e-commerce cold storage shippers, right down the road from here, just outside of Austin. But that's kind of our path. But I really do feel like the movement of food is medicine, and that what can we do better? Because we come from a thought line that whether it's making beef or helping these kids, whatever we do, we don't ever want to let good enough be good enough. And that's so important because, okay, beef was made efficient, but what was sacrificed in the meantime? Can the pendulum swing the other way? Can we do this in an awesome way? And for us, I mean, we don't even fit in a box. I mean, we're packing with a big packer with our smallest one. We use essentially food residuals. You can call it food waste, but it's not because we're upcycling it. up to 1 million pounds a day some days. It's a grass-fed program because these cattle are out on huge pastures, where before it was poor-boying it to dump carrots out in the middle of a big field. Well, this is what the market wanted to see. Cows still get to be a cow out on, it's a free-range concept. And even the grass hay that we feed alongside of it to supplement the grass, it's grown with recycled wastewater from the recycled rinse water from the carrot plant. And so I feel that where there's a will, there's a way. And even these big, billion-dollar ag companies, we can still close the loop if we put our minds to it on not only food and water waste, but how do we make this, because we haven't defined regenerative ag, I think some want to with soils and different things. But to me, it's like this is sustainability 2.0. Like how do we go from good to great and then keep going? Because that's the essence of all of this. So if we could take the waste from $1 billion operation and close loop it like it was great grandpa's pig farm where he fed the slop to the pigs, awesome. What a great model. And we could show the rest of the world how we're doing it too. Not only that, it is, half the carrots are organic that are going into the feed. And it's good for the animal. We can do this, and we pride ourselves in doing it with, no hormones, no antibiotics. We don't really need the antibiotics because it's a grain-free diet, and we're not really fighting that, long-term effects of a hotter feed ration. So it's a slower gain, but at the end of the day, it's a great product.
I mean, when you say when there's a will, there's a way, your grandfather's story, it's
wild.
Yeah.
So we had a fire on our place end of July, beginning of August. And we lost 10, 11,000 acres. And so we had cows up there, and the way it is, this was kind of the north end of the fire, but the main part of it. And I mean, we could get into it, but there is a huge resource problem in the wildfire area. These guys have been jacked around with pay increases, decreases. They're talking about Forest Service being out of money like FEMA's out of money. And some of these fires, these guys are leaving, the experience is leaving because they're not taking care of them. But anyway, it was a short resource fire, and it ended up getting into this ranch. And after about 2 or 3 days, we have what we call Santa Ana winds, where you have a high pressure go over the Four Corners on the West Coast, and it spins and pushes the hot air back towards California. And so it pushed this from the east, and then and it pushed the fire kind of south. Well, now it was headed towards my grandpa's place. He has a similar cow-calf, his summer ranch. And it was headed towards the house, which was like a family heirloom. My dad and my aunt grew up there. They drove dirt roads when they were 13, to get to school in high school and junior high. Like the old awesome ranch stories, right? Yeah. This thing is an heirloom. So we have this question, do we send the guys to take care of cows? Do we go help? We split resources. My dad took a dozer up and prepped the house, for fires. And then I took my 2 boys, they're 11 and 13, and everywhere the dozer couldn't get, we put saw line in and hand line to protect the house. Because, and we do this because, so my grandfather was a fireman, my dad was a fireman, I was a fireman, my brother was. We all did forest fires. My dad and grandfather, they worked for the county fire department, but predominantly in the fire heavy equipment. So bulldozers were their thing. They could run bulldozers in the mountains and any fire. My brother and I did hotshot crews, so we did a lot, we were chasing fires with chainsaws and helicopters and shovels and all the fun stuff. So we knew what we were doing, and we go up and we prep the house. And originally we had a conversation with the family because Grandpa was going on hospice. Like, hey, what do you guys think about bringing him up to the house? Like letting him go there, he's going downhill. And when the fire turned, that whole conversation was just ended. And meanwhile, while we have, 10 to 11,000 acres burning and trying to get cows out of it, water lines are burnt up. And so we couldn't even ship them. trying to like make sure grandpa's house is prepped. Grandpa passed in the middle of the week. This whole thing happened. It's like we had the most wild family adventure. My wife and I were literally picking up donated waterline parts on the weekends when we couldn't go get them at the water supply place, just so we could patch water lines to get cattle to the corrals so we could ship them out of there. Wow. It's Western out there, you know, but we were able to do it. But yeah, Grandpa he started it, and we just did his funeral last weekend. Friday we did a service. Awesome, like to see firemen and cowboys of all the walks, mountain folk, you know, telling all these wild, crazy stories. And you know, and like there's this really cool like special place on the ranch, spread his ashes. So it was an intimate thing, and I feel like that us continuing on the legacy, but kind of always adding on to it and trying to make it better. That's what it's about. So we get to kind of honor him, you know, honor God in the middle of all of it. But I had this conversation also. We had an event Thursday with the Cal Organic guys. They're a big carrot supplier, to do a lot of organic vegetables. And one of the conversations at this dinner, I forgot who said it, was if we're still doing the same thing in 10 years, we're wrong and we're going out of business. So everybody in the food industry needs to be thinking, you know, what do we look like in 10 years? And then also, what does the customer want? Because we've got efficiency. I mean, they're going to keep grinding on feedlot efficiency and data, different breeds, like just for cookie cutter cattle. I think that's always coming, but there's also this movement of traceability as far as single source. Like, yeah, they can do traceability on a lot of cattle for your steak, but what about ground beef? Is it single sourced? And a lot of people are like, gosh, how many cows are in this blend of ground beef? We don't want that. You know, and so learning how to pack cattle was very interesting, difficult, because the packers have the science down. Not a lot of people, it's just hard to figure out how to make that whole animal move like we talked about. But the way I learned and is just kind of like you doing a single steer. Now we do it 35 to 40 at a time, and you know, per load. Mm-hmm. And it's single source, single batch. It's not blended with animals from all over to meet lean content. And what's really cool about the carrots is that you can have like a fattier blend of ground beef, and the viscosity of it's so light because there's no corn grease in it. There's not, you know, stuff you're making ethanol with. And it's all that carrot smoothie, the carrot juice, the carrot water. That fat is so light that it's not sticking to the roof of your mouth, and you can eat a lot of it. You feel good on it. And the fat is just like, we drain it off and use it for tallow. It's good stuff, you know? And the carrots, on the, like, to make it juicy, that is what you look at. Like, there's a big Wagyu trend, because I feel like the beef world's looking for something new, and Wagyu does fill the void to an extent. But the Wagyu concept gets its moisture from the fat, where ours, we're going to get it from the muscle tissue, because the carrots, they really penetrate the muscle tissue, and all that water, it just stretches it out like a water balloon. And if the muscle's elastic, the more it's stretched, the more tender it is, because it's going to be easy to peel. You know, when you overwork some elastic, it just wears out over time. Mm-hmm. And so I try not to compare it to underwear too much, because it's something we're eating, you know, but you know, but the elasticity, you know, it really peels. And that's where, like, when you eat our steaks, you're going to get this like awesome pop in your mouth, like a berry bite. Like it's light, it's juicy, but you're getting all the carrot juice. So where you can eat, like, for a carnivore diet, great, because you can eat a lot of it and not just like 2 bites, and it's so rich, like a Wagyu. And so at the same time, you're going to get all these awesome vitamins from the carrots, the B12, zinc, beta carotene, so all the good things. And I do think that grass-fed beef really kind of broke the mold, the glass ceiling for where we would get docked if the fat was orange, you know, like it was not that corn fat white. Grass-fed made that okay. And it really paved the way for operations like ours to come in there and present our beef and say, yeah, it looks good, but doesn't look like your standard corn-fed steak, mm-hmm. But that's okay, just because you're not used to it. You know, I think 20 years ago, Budweiser was king of beers. And then look what happened to the craft beer after that. Like, people wanted something new so bad that they're willing to go out of their way, pay a little more, find the source of where it's made, meet the guy growing the steaks, meet the guy brewing the beer, and just know it. And this, call it renaissance, revolution, whatever it is, right? It is, because we're really just flipping the tables here on our food system.
It's happening really fast too. Because going back to the traceability and just like transparency is so big, because now, the pandemic really was the start of it, to where once they forced the vaccine, that opened up a lot of questions, and for a lot of folks to just question that. But then once you start questioning what all of COVID and all of that, then you start thinking about America's healthcare system, and then America's health and food system, because now we reached the point to where about 75% of this country is very unhealthy. And then you start learning more about the food system and how there could be USDA labeled beef that's imported from God knows where. There's studies, I forgot, I think it was Texas A&M, they did a study with, I think it was HEB beef, to where it was like 40 to 50 different types of beef within that, or 40 to 50 different cows. And so there's so much of that. And then also with just regenerative agriculture too, because for me, I'd never heard of that word until it was about February of 2022. And that was my light bulb moment of, I've been so disconnected from my food. I've always bought everything from a grocery store. I've never spoken to a farmer or rancher in my life. And so that really got the wheels spinning in my head. And then looking into just the history of our food and how we've gotten to the point now with how highly centralized it is. The transparency aspect is so huge now, and it gives me a lot of hope. And then to even just push it further, it's just the last few, I would say, month of the Make America Healthy Again initiative with RFK and Casey and Callie Means and a bunch of other doctors that went to Congress to talk about all of this stuff. It gives me so much hope, because of, especially considering what I've gone through too, of seeing what cancer can do to somebody, what heart disease and liver, everything can do to your mom, and seeing actually the healthcare system at play, because I spent 2.5 months with my brother in the hospital, and seeing how horrific that whole environment is, not just for the patients, but also for all of the employees. It's just awesome to see this massive awakening happening. But the only thing that can continue this and will actually change is kind of going back to you said a while ago, is voting with our dollar and actually supporting the farmers and ranchers. Because you can say, this is what's really interesting, it's very challenging, because online people will be like gung-ho about it, but then when push comes to shove, they still go to the grocery store and support large conglomerates, or don't go to the farmers markets. So it's really tough. And that's why I'm trying to make it as frictionless as possible. That's why I also have this podcast, so we can have these awesome stories that need to be shared, so folks understand just the full context of it all. Because again, my whole goal of all this is just bridging this gap, because this is the widest this gap's ever been, of the folks that produce the food and everyone else that actually consumes the food. We've never been more disconnected from our food or from where it's coming from. So yeah, that was a little tangent there, but that's why I think
you're right though. And you said frictionless.
Well, because to me, it makes me think about, for example, like I've been talking a lot about raw milk. Like, for example, I have the tagline "Raw is Law," and raw milk sales are skyrocketing. But then in a lot of places, there's still a lot of laws and regulations to where it's difficult to obtain. Or if you can't obtain it, you have to drive an hour to go to the farm to pick it up, which a lot of folks aren't going to do. So I'm trying to find ways to make it so easy, because we're so used to, in America at least, we're so used to efficiency and like with food, for example, prepackaged food, you just microwave it and you don't have to think about it, and then you just eat in front of a TV because you've had a long day. And so it's really hard to try to get them to make some changes that way. But if I can make it as frictionless as possible for them, but also for you all, to me, that's going to make a lot of changes, and people will actually change how they use their dollar for the food and drinks that they buy.
I think we can't stop talking about it.
Exactly.
I think that is the biggest thing, is it just always needs to be in the air. Because if you turn the TV on, half the commercials are big pharma. They're in the air. So like the only way to combat that is with just keep talking about it. And it doesn't have to happen overnight. Like, look, we make a very healthy beef and I'm not carnivore. Like but at the same time, we talk about it so much. I think about, okay, if I order a burger, the bread probably will last on a shelf for 6 months. Like that's like embalming a body. So if I order sourdough, if I'm not that hungry, like you could start skipping out bread. If the organic, like if you're looking at organic pricing, if you're going to buy an avocado and one of them you have to wait 5 days for, but you need guacamole that night and it's conventional, like why? You going to save this or that? I do believe in organic farming. And there's a place for both, but the more we talk about it, the more people wake up. I'm not against, a mom going to the store and getting the cut of beef that is, as cost efficient as possible. So I'm not here to like beat up feedlots or anything. There's a place for everyone. I think look at the carnivore movement. They're going to say, well, look, we all can't just eat grass-fed meat. We got to have, when we're busy, there's things we travel with, the food prep stuff. But the more we talk about it, the more we think about it. Am I going to order a soda or am I going to order water? Okay, because there's a lot of sugar. Or there's a lot of fake sugar that's probably worse than the real sugar. Now we're having a conversation, where's my water come from? Is there fluoride in it? Do I need to change my filter more in my fridge? I don't think everyone has to go cold turkey overnight. I don't think it works. I just think that the more we talk about it, the more you're subconsciously, you start thinking, and like I eat chicken less now because chicken's mass produced. I'm not saying don't do it. My kids always want chicken when we go somewhere. But I don't. I kind of know if seafood, fresh caught seafood or wild caught or a grass-fed beef, like okay, I can order the same thing right there on the menu. How many pieces of bread are you going to eat? So I think as long as we're constantly talking about it, then we're at the front of it. If you mentioned, RFK and, the Cali Casey means, so we went to Wyoming for this state convention, and I had no idea what I was going into.
Was it the Wyoming Cowboy Cuts?
Yes.
I wish I could have made that.
So cool.
I wish I could have made that.
Game changer. Okay. And my dad and I went, and I literally just mailed whatever we had. I had our shipper mail it and thought we were going to go up there just for people to try our meat. When there was like half a dozen of like carnivore influencers got up and spoke, and a lot of them had underlying diseases. They talked about chronic pain, inflammation, being scarred by antibiotics. My dad has had, he's had multiple surgeries, just, fireman, cowboy, knees and back stuff, but he's prone to staph infection, and he's been hammered with antibiotics. He also had AFib, a couple years ago, and they ended up having to shock him. Drugs didn't work, but he's back to normal. So we're listening, and he still has some health issues, and it's aging him. And I was like, you know what? Let's listen to this interview, because I'd already listened to it, the one with Tucker Carlson, and he listened to the whole thing. And then it was the same week that Bobby Kennedy Jr. Came over and joined forces with Trump. And he's listening to all this, and I'm telling him, like, look, we're in the right spot. We have to hang in there. Like, I know we're always on the verge of bankruptcy. Like, we're in the cattle business, but we have to hang in there for these people, not just to see the job through, because that's our mindset. But do you see how many people out there need products like ours? There are I have letters from parents that say, like, thank you for saving my child. They couldn't eat anything. They were getting sick. They were losing weight. And your meat, they love it. They eat it. And we cannot get enough of it. Thank you. So for all those people out there that are looking, that they need red meat, but they can't, whether we're working on a histamine sensitivity project with some of them since then, as far as non-wet aged, which I learned a lot. But anyway, we're driving back because we drove from California to Wyoming, and we listened to these, and he got home and he goes, I heard them say that the average American's on 10 different prescription drugs. And I thought, that's wild. He goes, I counted mine. I'm on 7. He goes, 5 of them were for AFib that I'm healed from, but they're still selling me drugs. And so he threw them away, and he's like, I felt better. I was able to start hiking again, started working out again because my inflammation went down.
So yesterday, because this is also going to food as medicine. I mean, I have Hashimoto's, and I've also, through all of my trauma, I mean, my escapism was weed and a lot of processed food. So I destroyed my body through all of this. And that's yet another reason why I have this brand, is all of the shit I went through. I don't wish upon anybody. But I went to the doctor yesterday just to get some blood work done. And she was pushing all kinds of things on me, including psychiatry and meds with that. And I'm just like, you never once talked about my diet. You never once talked about my sleep schedule or sunlight or any of the things that will actually help me. Instead, you push me to all these medications and Band-Aids. And I left so angry. I'm waiting for the blood test, and I'm never going back to that person. But just to add to that is just, I'm another example of, they just push all kinds of stuff rather than actually addressing the root causes.
Yeah. What if someone said, why don't you eat clean for like 2 weeks and exercise? And I'm a believer in it. Like we've been moving. I got in a fight before we moved, and I was all beat up. That's a crazy story we'll get to. I'll tell you some Wild West ones. We got time. So, and I finally I got to go for a run yesterday. Had time, old man workout. You have no idea what kind of demons you can sweat out with exercise.
Absolutely.
And doctors don't hold you to, look, all you gotta do is go for a walk for 30 minutes. And then if you could jog, if you could sweat cures more, I feel like, emotional problems, depression. It is a great fight for it. I tell people Jesus and exercise, man. It's just because you've got to just change the oil in your body. But the doctors are just going to keep selling stuff and selling stuff.
Yeah. Was interesting you saying prescribing food and exercise. I haven't watched the full episode yet, but Casey and Callie were on Rogan recently. Casey mentioned that she didn't know for the longest time that you could prescribe that. It's legally allowed to prescribe a good nutrition and exercise to your patients, but obviously they're not going to do that because they don't have the money incentives for that. And I just found that fascinating.
They're drug dealers, and the ones who know it. And if not, they're about to. Some of them are probably waking up saying, my God, what have I been doing? Maybe I think COVID woke a lot of them up. There was so much pushback. There was a civil war in the medical field of how to cure this stuff,
Yeah.
Or if we should even be prescribing drugs or throwing boosters at it, or is it gone? Or is it, technically this thing should be watered down by now, but we're still selling. And the celebrities that come, the money behind it is crazy to me. Until I heard Callie and Casey talk, I didn't think about 50% of the media is funded by big pharma. And then you watch all this stuff. Wow.
I remember I wrote a Twitter thread, I think it was last year, breaking down the top 10 largest pharma ads. And it's just billions of dollars spent on ads. Why would companies spend billions of dollars on ads for pharmaceuticals?
Yeah.
Because they can make so much money off of you. And we're the only country in the world that allows that. The only one. New Zealand technically does, but they don't have, because I remember too, also, this was 2021 Christmas. I went back. So this is after my brother died. And I was just sitting with my parents in the bonus room watching TV. Every single commercial break, there was at least 2 pharma commercials. I counted it because I haven't watched TV in forever, so I haven't been used to the commercials that I used to see. And even then, I was just astounded. We're so used to it. Like you're saying, that's such a great point on going back to, we just need to continue to talk about it, because from a TV aspect to where our generations are so used to cable TV with commercial breaks, that just became so normal to my parents. They weren't noticing, but I was just sitting there thinking, holy shit, this is every single commercial break. There's at least 2. It was so infuriating.
I do believe we keep talking about it. And as far as the media goes, are you catching now, when you turn the news on, can you catch a spin? I feel like we're starting to break the mold of trust the mainstream media.
Oh, definitely. Because I can see, just for for transparency's sake of my business too, it's always interesting, folks thinking if there's just a giant team behind Regenaissance. There's only me and a few others, and I'm in charge of all of the social media still. But it's been interesting to see the progression of just my Instagram, because I post a lot about everything that's going on, and it's been interesting seeing so many comments. And again, it gives me a lot of hope, because there are day by day, so many people waking up to what's going on, and people are starting to really question things and think for themselves. And that's been my whole goal of my Instagram, is pointing out the craziness of America's health system. For example, I've had this segment of the FDA only approves one of these things, and on the left of the image is some crazy like Oreo Coke, and then the right's raw milk. And I'm trying to just point out just how crazy our systems become, and you just have to think for yourself and realize that. And
how do you feel about the ingredients in Europe? Like, there's half the ingredient. Why? If you can make the same product with less, then why are you spending more money for this? Is it literally to get people hooked on it? Is it to of their cravings? Is it to make them want it the next time? Like, why are we doing this if it doesn't need to be done?
In my opinion, it's a couple of things. One is to definitely make you more addicted. Two is to cut corners, make it cheaper, higher profit margins. And to me, those are the two biggest things. Because whenever you think about it from the business aspect, the main thing is for the shareholders and the owners to highest profits possible. And especially in a capitalist system, or you can also argue it's crony capitalism, but
it is when they have lobbyists.
Yeah. And so that's why I'm a capitalist at heart, and a lot of the stuff that's going on is not capitalism at all. It's captured crony capitalism, especially in a fiat world. I mean, that's why going back to agriculture is just a very centralized system. But actually, because I wanted to bring this up previously, I am still worried about our food system for a lot of reasons. I've seen some really staggering statistics. Like for the cattle business, we have the lowest inventory, I think, since 1949, and that continues to get worse. Two is we've lost, I think, 7% of our farms and ranches in the last 3 years. And that's why, for me, time is of the essence, but that's also why I'm trying to educate as much as possible, because if you don't change how you're voting with your dollar, who knows what's going to happen in the coming years, because it's already hard enough, like you're saying, to start a business for the small producer. That's only going to be more difficult as it gets more centralized, as the people that are already very powerful get more powerful and can, create the laws and whatnot in their favor, even though it's already in their favor. So that's why for me, like the direct to consumer, but then also what you're doing is so crucial, along with just all of the awareness.
So the low inventory is, man, that's the big elephant in the room right now. And I mean, I'm gonna sound like Elon praising the oil and gas, saying we need to drill while we do this, because one, cattle are expensive right now for us to source, especially us that want hormone-free, grass-fed, grain-free, antibiotic-free, like then the traceability on them. So we use an animal ID. That's always a big chat, right? Well, you have to have that for your claims. So by the time it gets all the way down the line, it's a pricey beef, and it's so tough. And I've heard the conversation, and I do agree with it. You could pay now for your health, or you can pay later for your sickness.
I mean, it's my whole family. That's exactly what happened to my family.
Yeah. And how much shit are you eating because you didn't make an extra steak or a hamburger patty, or, I mean, my wife and I are big on, like, we make a lot of ground beef. My daughter, she loves it. If you're trying to give her protein, like, she's a kid. She likes chicken strips and the French fries and this and that, but she will eat a bowl of ground beef. Like, okay, well, let's talk about this. She likes spaghetti sauce, but you can crush your own tomatoes and make spaghetti sauce. And now we're feeding a kid healthy protein.
Mm-hmm.
So just takes a little effort, a little try, but, it's out there and it can be done. But so right now, the beef industry is seeing a huge influx of these beef on dairy cross cattle. And it is combating the national herd being short. But the beef on dairy cross is, it's a Black Angus a Holstein cross. And for years, think of all the culling they've done for when dairy cows start to underperform. That could be from too much hot feed, corn, whatever, the grains that they're feeding them. But over time, they've bred these Holsteins to be able to to take this kind of feed, and that's in their genetics, and more power to them. But when we started crossing these Angus genetics in there, they haven't seen hot feed that long. So when a calf's born on a dairy, it's taken from mom day one. So I know there's a lot of like, are all cows on grass at some point? No. And they're raised in a calf hutch, they'll bottle feed them until they're big enough. And then they go on, like a silage and then corn. And they go on, by the time they're 300 pounds, they're little peewees, and they're on hot feed, and they're growing. They're growing them up. And there's corn in their diet.
And hot feed?
Huh?
Can you use hot feed?
Like a high energy diet. So corn, barley, the grains that the feedlot feeds, right? For their total mixed ration. So their livers aren't taking it. Well, before, do you remember when the big antibiotics push was happening years ago, or know of it? So they're used to be able to put
for
cattle. Yeah, they used to be able to put low doses of antibiotics in their feed, and that would fight this E. coli factory that was in their first rumen because of so much grain for a long period of time. Short period of time, it works. Long period where it doesn't sometimes, and that would keep the abscesses and all the infections down. But now, these weren't sick animals. It was a preventative antibiotic. Now it's in all the food stream. So that's when everyone was saying, hey, am I going to be antibiotic resistant if I get MRSA or staph? Like, why is there medication going into my food stream for so long? So that was like a big pushback. And then, so they've essentially removed that unless a vet approves it.
What changed that? Or I guess why did
the market?
Good.
The noise was loud enough. The noise was loud enough to say, if it's not sick, why are we doctoring it?
See, that's a side note on awareness is why it's so key, because a lot of times the only reason why this happens is because the government's been able to get away with it because no one's aware. So yeah, I just want to add that tidbit.
Things are approved by the FDA until they're not, and that's kind of somebody has to be loud enough to say it. And so the antibiotics kind of went away, and then now this beef on dairy cross is coming in, and it's like 25% of cattle on feed are these beef on dairy crosses, and they are pushing for it because they are traceable from day one. The data you get from them is incredible because how many pounds of compost they're putting out or manure they're putting out, how many pounds of feed, the intake, everything. These are the cookie cutter cattle, and a lot of them go to export. Think about it. They're so universal. They can go to other countries and it's consistent product every time, but that's really filling up a lot of it. The livers are over 50% abscesses in their livers. So it shows us that even though we need it as far as helping plug the hole of the national beef herd, there is a problem with this. But which rabbit hole do you want to go down on that one? Because is it the feed? What is in the corn that's making these abscesses? Is it glyphosates? Is it something that's sprayed on it? Is it how it's processed? Is it all of it?
I think it's all of it. Plus the GMO wheat, because I always see the convo about how folks go to, say, Italy, and they can eat all the bread and pasta they want and never have any gut issues, and they come back here and all of a sudden they can't. And one, it's definitely the sprays, but two, it's also just the over time we've GMO'd wheat to where it's nothing like what's grown in Italy. And I think those two things combined is why because for me, I had gut issues my whole life. I remember growing up, I went to have an ultrasound of my gut, and then it was when I moved down in Austin in 2018, and I used to work for IBM, and one of my coworkers, she mentioned how she had all these crazy gut issues too, and I mentioned I had the same thing, and then she just cut out all gluten, and so I decided to do that, and then that weekend, no issues. And I was like, my whole life, I had issues with that. It's just not good quality. Because I've had, for example, sourdough. If you have good quality sourdough, I have not had issues like I would having normal bread in the American store.
Normal bread in an American store jacks me up.
Because not even, I shouldn't even say normal bread because it's not even normal.
It's not normal bread. So we have this awesome local bakery back home in California, and a lot of the local Italian and Basque restaurants, they use their bread. They're great suppliers, and you can get them at some of the chains. The bigger chains only in the local markets. This bread is awesome for about 4 days. And by day 7 to 10, like, it's green. I could buy the same sourdough loaf or any bread, and it is good for a year. I feel like we embalmed it, and we probably did. And that's what I will have horrible indigestion if fast food bread is like the worst for you, I feel like.
Oh, yeah.
But we're tackling seed oils right now. It's a great start, right? So there's a huge seed oil conversation happening. Yeah. Our burger customers are reaching out to us, asking us if we're making tallow.
Really?
Yeah. So it's good, right? And we're not there yet. I think we're probably Q1 of next year, we'll have tallow available.
I mean, the fact that people are calling you for that is awesome.
It's awesome. And they're reaching out to us constantly for it. We do have some of our tallow goes to a skincare line called Lucky Pearl, and they do a great job, and they're super healthy, super clean.
See, that's just another thing too, is now people are waking up to all of the skincare products that are in groceries or that are in stores. Should not be using any of that. There's so many natural products. It's going back. I mean, that's why I have Regenaissance, because to me it is a regenaissance of we're going back to.
Do you know about renewable fuels? You know much about that?
No.
So a big ingredient for renewable fuels, which is like soy is a big one, but tallow is also. And I sat next to a lady on the plane a couple days ago on the way out last Monday. And so she was telling me about, she worked for renewable fuels. And I love recycling products. Like, that's my thing. We feed garlic peels, and it helps with like flies and worms and parasites. And so we're not using pesticides. Cattle like lay in it, roll in it, and they'll nibble on it a little bit. And it literally helps with insect control. So I'm all about reusing stuff, especially like in the food world. But their main ingredient for it is tallow. So I want you to think about this. Here we are, 2024, where like cars can drive by themselves, but we are using tallow to make diesel, and we're using vegetable oil to fry French fries. Is that the most backward thing you've ever heard of? When tallow forever was used for frying and it was cleaner, and when McDonald's was using tallow, people weren't fat. All right. Like, it was just a thing.
I've written extensively on all the McDonald's stuff too, because it used to be, I really wish I would have been able to experience having an actual McDonald's meal whenever they weren't using all the BS they use now.
Yeah. It's wild. Now I feel like Michael Douglas in Falling Down. You ever see that? That's not a whammy burger. I ordered a whammy burger, So it's sad. My kids don't go there. I don't think they've ever eaten there unless their friends took them. They're just, hey, we'll drive an extra mile to get somewhere that I know cooks fresh stuff. And by the way, like, the buns here aren't, but luckily, like, my kids are growing up in a house where we talk about it. My oldest son, he goes on sales meetings with me, and he gets to hear a lot of, as we either explain it to a butcher, a chef. He would have loved to be here today. My younger son, he's a cowboy, man. He just wants to like ride his horse and sleep in the dirt and shoot guns, and like, it's cool, right? Like, I got a place for both of them because we sell meat and we grow cattle, and it's wonderful. But my kids are around it so much, and they're around ag, that they know the difference. Well, we don't go to McDonald's. It's like I know we're doing sports, we're busy, probably gonna do fast food tonight, but the bigger chains, there's a reason they're cheap. And that's something I heard someone say, like, on pricing. You're asking us why our product costs a little more when we should be asking why the other products cost so much less.
What's even crazy right now too with the inflation is the fact that fast food isn't cheap anymore. You can get a steak for nearly the price of a fast food meal. But people, again, that's something people don't even think about. The fact that
and the best steak you're going to have, no offense to any of my chefs out there, is the one in your backyard. Like, how you like your steak, you're going to cook it. And so we've just learned, like, ground beef, we cook 5 pounds at a time, and it'll keep us from eating crap food because we'll just make something at home. And I'll take a bowl of ground beef and throw an avocado on it. And that'll hold me over till later, till we have a family meal. But I could have just went and got shit the same way I warmed up ground beef and an avocado. It's not as hard. But I don't think you're going to get the world to just cold turkey everything.
No.
But what if they switch a meal a week? What if they switch 2 meals a week? What if they go for a walk? What if they actually don't sign up for a medication. The cholesterol thing, gosh, how many people you hear about that are on cholesterol medicine? What percentage do you think need it?
Or if, on top of that too, or what if you shake a rancher's hand for the first time in your life? Because again, going like just meeting your local farmers and ranchers, for me, I've said this time and time again, agriculture in so many ways literally saved my life. I mean, I worked on a farm in the fall of 2022. I went back there last month, pretty much almost 2 years on the dot. And like, I try not to get emotional because, and it's why I'm so passionate about this, why I have this podcast, is some of the greatest people I've ever met in my life are in agriculture, and they just work tooth and nail to just support for their families and communities of good quality food. And it's just tragic from my perspective of what's happened in America, because I love America so much, and just the history of it and the history of especially agriculture. I mean, I'm in Texas, so obviously it has a rich history of cattle too. So yeah, I just wanted to add that.
I'm going to try not to say too much, but I will tell you, the most honest handshake people in the world are farmers and ranchers. But what happens when the cattle leave the ranch and it goes into the meat business? I feel like the meat business is the dirtiest. They say you don't ever want to see laws and sausages be made. It's in there. Like meat grinding, cutting. There are horror stories I hear on the food service side where if I sold 200 pounds of steaks to someone, they were serving 300 pounds. But they all got served to Santa Carota. Okay, that's an example that happens a lot. And
how does that happen?
You can reuse a box. You can distributors that cut steaks. You know, if a restaurant says, "Hey, I got a wedding, will you cut the steaks for me?" and they ordered 200 pounds and they need 300, they'll buy some cheaper stuff and slip it in. It's very common. We've had to fight it. We learn about it. The best thing the biggest job I do, and my favorite part of my job, is education. We have people reach out to us on social media, phone calls, emails daily, and I love it. And if I don't get back to you for a little bit, or remind me, because it is a constant, I want to answer every question out there. And that, I think, is so big because the ranchers can just tell you. They're honest. They're going to tell you what you vaccinate with. Why? I think just knowing that, where do your cattle go after that? Who backgrounds them? Do they go on grass after you wean them? Do you background your own cattle? Are they going into a grow lot? How many times have they been shipped?
That's a great point. And I'm curious, do you think if they were to say I'm a customer that wants to go to and visit a ranch and ask these questions, if they were to be pretty closed off, I feel like that would be not a great sign.
Vote with your dollar.
Yeah.
Vote with your dollar. I don't think enough ranchers are doing it. I think the next generation coming up with an iPhone or social media or whatever, that's going to save this. Because so many ranchers are doing so many good things. I have some really close friends of ours, and we source cattle from them, and they do organic cattle. They do a lot of GAP program cattle. And the whole not let good enough be good enough thing. So there's a respiratory vaccine that people give, and you don't have to. It's not, and this older guy, and his name's Jimmy Echeverry, and his son Nick and I are dear friends. He says, "Justin, I don't think I'm going to give that one this year." I said, "Okay, why?" I'm listening because I want to know. Because that respiratory thing, it lasts 2 weeks, and it's supposed to activate. They get sick when it's dusty, but it's supposed to rain for the next 2 or 3 weeks, and there's not going to be any dust. I feel like not only am I saving money, I'm not putting an extra stress of a vaccine on my animal. What? I love that thinking, whether it's right or wrong. I love the concept of it. We're branding, and he's like, "Hey, I'm going to try, don't hold the iron on so long. Just flash, touch, and go. Let's see how it goes. If they're hair branded, we're going to watch them. But I feel like sometimes let's just a little, half a second less on the branding iron. I want to lower the stress of these calves." Like that's going to prevent any doctoring, any sickness. It's going to make everything better. If they're low stress, we're low stress. They're going to go right on and perform, produce, and grow instead of shrinking and having any kind of bad period. So, what are we doing that's unnecessary that someone told us we had to do it? It's like the 5 medications my dad was taking. What are we doing that's unnecessary? Can we cut that? It's not that we're cutting corners. It's that we just get to peel off some of the bullshit we've been doing because some lobbyists told us we needed to do it. And I think that's a big part of it, you know? And everyone's got different climates for different cattle. And I wouldn't go to Montana and tell someone how to run cattle. No way. They know exactly what they're doing. But as long as we all kind of have an open mind as what our end user wants, and let's educate them. We can't do this because. We can do this because. We met with some of those carnivore influencers in Wyoming, and I learned so much about non-aged meat for histamine sensitivity. Well, we learned from the chefs that, man, if a wet aged 45 days in a wet bag, it's a more tender steak. So
can you also explain you mentioned like wet age versus
a dry age?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So a dry age is where the meat, essentially the outside, is exposed in a controlled environment, and essentially the bacteria is going to break it down, and it's kind of a nuttier flavor. You got to cut a little bit of the outside off, but for a long time, I mean, old butchers, they could hang it for a little bit longer, and it makes the meat more tender. A wet age, that's like a hanging carcass, right? So the whole thing is exposed. Or, you see some restaurants having like a rib rack, like an export rib.
Okay, yeah.
That's dry aging, so it's exposed. Well, the wet age, it's in a cryovac and it'll sit in a cooler. So like I used to go to Costco and buy, a whole tenderloin or a whole strip loin, and I'd leave it in my fridge for 30 days and then I'd cook it, and it makes it tender, and they can go a long time. And we thought, after the 21-day period of being able to go to food service, we put another week or 2 on it, cut it into individual steaks, and that's what goes to our e-commerce. And that's how we kind of make the flow of things go. If products held up, we could do a sale on it, whatever, and on the balancing supply and demand act. Well, after talking with some of these people that are histamine sensitive, we sent them some meat. They said they felt good, but maybe they can notice it a little bit. Would love to see a little bit of irritation here and there. Would love to see what it looks like non-aged. So the packer that we work with, awesome people, One World Beef. They're down in Southern California. It's a Temple Grandin facility, very humane, great guys. And they do a lot of, corn finish stuff. But we are able to fill in the times that their cattle aren't running with ours, and they have grass-fed programs, they have Wagyu programs, and kudos to them for making a big packing facility available to a smaller producer. I think, I love that. For them to kind of piggyback us. But they're able to cut individual steaks off the packing floor. Now, for us, I never wanted to do that, even though it would save pennies, and pennies add up when you're talking about pounds and pounds and pounds. But I felt like if someone's going to spend the big bucks on our steak, it might be for an anniversary, a special occasion. I wanted it to be the most tender steak possible. But now they're asking for, you harvest it, it hangs, it's got a hot weight, and then it cools off in the cooler. Your cold weight is when they grade it, it's your grade weight. And they hang for 2-3 days. And then, so ours, we harvest Thursday morning. So we harvest a load this morning, and then Monday morning we'll pack them. And the histamine sensitivity group, which I want to help these people, and I really do.
You're speaking to me then.
Okay,
I do.
How do we not let good enough be good enough? If we could pack these off the floor, let's do it. If we could take, and this is what, because we're one of the few grass-fed companies that can grade USDA Choice and Prime, which is awesome. It's sexy for a restaurant, food sales, because we get to check all the boxes. They could put us on in the prime spot on a menu, put us in the grass-fed spot. It's awesome. But we have occasionally some select one or two here and there, probably 10-15% of our animals, they just won't grade USDA. And look, Michael Jordan had 4 brothers that didn't make the NBA. It just is what it is, right? And so I'm working with them. I'm like, why don't we just take those animals? Our flavor profile is the same, and it is like our select I'll put up against a lot of meats. And because the moisture comes from the muscle tissue, so you still get this great eating experience. So we're really working on how do we take our ribeyes, our New Yorks, like our good quality steaks, and make them as cost efficient as possible for the health conscious people that are going to eat this multiple times a day. And this isn't going to only be their food, but their medicine too. And so for so long, we were this white tablecloth concept. And now I think the cat's out of the bag with all the health issues. And luckily, like, red meat is curing people.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I'm going to say that again. Red meat is curing people. And that was the devil for so long. But that's because the food pyramid was funded by the grain companies. And the grain companies, who do you think their biggest customers are? The feedlots and so on and so forth. Like,
it's going back to Casey and Callie too, they talked about on Rogan too, is just what happened whenever the cigarette companies ended up buying a lot of the food companies, and then they pushed the ultra processed garbage. Yeah, it's crazy because the whole things have been demonized, have been saturated fat and fat as overall. Because I remember growing up, I'm a millennial. I grew up in the 90s and early 2000s. Is just the fact that I was drinking skim milk. I avoided whole milk like the plague. Even though I liked beef, I never really ate red meat because I always thought I'm going to get cancer. I always ate lean chicken breast, which looking back is just gross. I was missing out on chicken thighs and all these other beautiful, tasty parts of the chicken. But now, like you're saying, people are really waking up to the actual food as medicine movement, and it's great that going back to the Make America Healthy Again, it gives me a lot of hope.
I think that our timing's good, even though it's been a 7-year startup. Like, we're still making payments to ranchers for cows that are already on feed. Haven't paid ourselves salaries. We're like living off, like, mortgaging houses, selling equipment. We've put everything we have into this.
I can relate to that.
And so, yeah, so you get it. And yeah. It's, but I feel like our timing's so good now. Like, I don't know about you, but I really am seeing light at the end of the tunnel.
Oh, absolutely. That's why I'm realizing I'm pretty emotional, but it's probably just because of all the stuff in my family. It's all of the people that are speaking out in agriculture, such as yourself, but also, again, keep going back to like Casey and Callie Means, because they literally stopped what they were doing and woke up to the realization of, holy smokes, we've got a lot of problems in America. And the fact that they're so outspoken and dedicating their lives to this stuff, like, I know one day I'll get to meet them and shake their hands, because there's so many people out there that might, again, going back to, you're fine right now, but you might not be fine in the future. Again, I was fine my whole life. I had a pretty straightforward life. And then literally as the pandemic happened, that's when I found my brother got cancer. And since then has been hell, literal hell on earth, because there's so many ups and downs. And because of that, I gave myself my own pretty much diseases that I am healing, but from just trauma-induced stuff. And this is what's interesting about the food as medicine too, is say you're eating the standard American diet and then you get sick, or your loved one gets sick, you're going to use that trauma to most likely, like what I did, which was food, and I just ate a bunch of processed food. And then that's how I got the conditions that I have. And so it gives me so much hope, especially considering it seems like as at the beginning of the pandemic, it didn't seem like that at all. But it's happening so fast. Me personally too, I'm getting messages constantly now on Regenaissance about them or their friends are waking up to that too. So the fact that I'm even getting messages from that too, I did not truly expect, especially this fast, because I only launched last year in May. So I've only been a year doing this, a year and a half. Yeah.
So my wife's dad died of cancer a couple months ago. And It was a big deal. It was a big hit. And he'd been around farming his whole life. I married into the produce business, and I learned a lot. And it helped us a lot too. But he was like a Pepsi drinker, and that was, even at the end, I'm like, hey man, I got like an alkaline water thing or whatever. You want to at least clean this up and to him, it was too late. But just the processed food and years of it, like a 6-year-old can walk in the store and buy it. That's why there should be some kind of, and I don't like the nanny state, but we don't have to slap a surgeon general on it. The whole world just needs to know fires are hot and rabbits are fast, right? Like sodas long-term are bad for you. You can get fat, you can get diabetes, you can have all other underlying health issues, and it's going to weaken your body's immune system to fight off whatever it is the world wants to throw at you. And
it's just empty calories too. And like you can drink it and it's not like it's going to make you full and satiated like a steak will.
No, it's bad.
But even just going back to the nanny, I would push back to that too, because if you look at just the statistics alone, especially for adolescents, I mean, children are getting non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. It's like 10 or 11%. That is absurd.
Yeah. So my youngest son likes the junk food, and we're always like pushing back on it. You got to like keep beef jerky available, anything will deter him.
Yeah.
And he gets bloody noses. And he goes to practice. He joined a new baseball team, gets a bloody nose. Coach says, "What'd you eat? You had too much sugar or too much of something that wasn't healthy for you that gave you bloody nose. Now trace your meals back today. Start cutting that shit out." I love that we can talk to kids like that now. Like, look, you have this problem, then it's your diet. Food, forever it was, just eat enough to be healthy, and as long as food's available, and we were microwaving food and we were doing all these. Well, no, like now we can say there is something in food, but no one ever wanted to tell the emperor he wasn't wearing clothes. And now finally someone was like, yeah, he's not. Why does Europe have so many much different ingredients? Why do my kids want to keep going back for that same damn brand of chips instead of all these other ones, different flavors? What's in that thing? I think it's a great question and a conversation, and the fact that it made it to Congress, the fact that a Kennedy is with a Republican Party just for the sake of saving kids and their health, I have so much hope for the future. I really do. It might be a bumpy road, but when you have the right people saying they're going after essentially the lobbyists, right? Yep. Like the big ag and big food and big pharma, you start pulling those guys out of Washington and making a level playing field. I think it's your renaissance is about to take off. It's a big deal, Yeah. It really is.
I mean, that just goes back to the awareness. That's why social media, I mean, there are a lot of downsides to social media, but there's a lot of upsides, and this is one of them. For the fact, I think it's like True Food Babe or True Food Mom. She's the founder of Truvani. She's one of the wonderful people that spoke in Congress. And then I think Jason Karp, and just and they're also the founders of alternative products that are good. So like Jason Karp has chocolate that's not loaded with BS, with a lot of the stuff that's in grocery stores.
We have a jerky company we're working with, and they just launched essentially like a dough. It's like a flour, and it's made from organ meats and beef, and they're drying it and saying, look, we can do a lot of it. It's like we're making the pendulum swing a big direction the other way, but it's only to counter how far we've let it go the first way.
Absolutely.
There's a gal we work with that she's come to the ranch a couple times, and it's a lot, it's several days of interviews and ranch tours. She's here in Austin. But after like a few days of it, you're exhausted, and but we get to tell our story. And I think I love this podcast. I love like anybody who wants to come out and take pictures of the ranch, let them see what we're doing. I think the transparency side of it, and let the people decide, instead of making laws and rules about how big a pig's pen space can be, vote with your dollars. Like find someone who makes pork you like, beef you like, and stick with it, chop it, whatever. I mean, does everyone eat and drink the same thing all the time? No, but just, I think that the more we can have brands available and promote them, the better. I do believe rising tides are going to raise all ships in our realm at the moment. And we shouldn't be quarreling about one guy's grass-fed versus my carrot-fed when there's a whole nother Goliath out there to slay.
Absolutely.
And I'm still not picking on all the feedlot guys. But I do have a problem with some people being having lobbyists and then us not. And I'll probably be blackballed for this, but like the beef checkoff program, it promotes beef, but every like $2 of every animal has to go to beef promotion. Well, that's essentially marketing money for the big packers because we're promoting their beef. They own most of the market, but every animal that's sold, transacted, has to pay for that for a commodity marketing checkoff program. And it's in a lot of other foods, but we have a marketing budget too. So now I'm trying to market my budget against their budget. Their budget's bigger because they have everyone's dollars and I have my marketing dollars to prove while my beef is better and they're trying to prove while their beef is better. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of we got to swim upstream on a lot of these currents and it takes a lot. But I think as long as we're all cheering each other on and not trying to like eat each other as rats as what we're doing, I think we are gonna raise all the ships with this tide.
No, I definitely agree.
And like you said, the voting with your dollars. The supply chain's the hard one though. Getting product to people is so hard. How do you get raw milk to people? How do you get farm fresh eggs from a pasture in Texas to another state? That is very difficult. You have to be making pallets at a time. You have to be able to have a consistent supply to get to your customer. And I hate to say it, but the big guys got that locked down.
Oh yeah.
And even getting into them, how much product you have to give away for free to convince them and sample their customers that yours is better. And then the price point. And yeah, it's, my hat's off to anybody, man. And everyone who's trying to make their own label of beef and get it out there and be vertically integrated. I'm cheering you on. I really am.
I want to segue a little bit into just the story side of things. Cause you mentioned that you have some wild stories.
Okay, so
I'd love to hear some.
Where the ranch is positioned, we're so spoiled, man. It's like this old like blue collar golf course that they're fixing up, and it's so awesome. And our ranch touches it. So in California, we lived on this old golf course, but had side by sides in the driveway, and kids had quads, and we can go out on the ranch. When we do ranch tours, we meet at the golf club. And then everyone, like last time we rented like 12 side-by-sides, put 50 people on them and drove the ranch and show you guys what we do. But for a while, or a few years ago, the cartels showed up and started putting greenhouses to grow illegal pot. Now, cannabis is legal in California, but only in certain counties, different parts, and it's very regulated. Well, they were showing up doing illegal ones and they'd sell it in the hood or whatever. And, we couldn't get anybody to like come help us with it. And my kids would drive their quads kind of by there and they were little and I didn't want them to see something they weren't supposed to. And now what we thought we had this, a couple thousand acres in our backyard is now, oh my gosh, like the kids have to be protected and in a bubble. And so, sheriff says they're underfunded. They can't do a big sting for a while and couldn't get a whole lot of help. Well, our local police department was having their shooting range eminent domain because it was in town and town was too close around it. So we set up a shooting range for them by the greenhouses. So when all the cop cars show up and just start shooting shit, pulling the big guns out, setting up long range stuff for their SWAT team, like whoever's running the greenhouses didn't want any part of that. They packed their shit and left. And so now we helped the cops out and we got rid of the bad guys all in the same role with it. And a few weeks ago, and it's been going on for months, my old partner with a trucking company, like dear family friend, he got on drugs and he started showing up at the ranch and like it was bad, saying he owned it. He was just spun. The chemicals that are coming across the border right now and coming from other countries will ruin families, ruin lives. We can have a conversation about pharmaceutical drugs, and then there's the dirty drugs that people think aren't. And it is frying brains, and it is killing people, and it is a horrible, horrible thing to watch. And Open border has a lot to do with it, whatever you want to point the blame at. But this guy, he ended up on drugs and was like trying to get into my house, trying to like go to other ranches. Everyone was scared. He was like, but he had been to my kids' birthday parties for years. And anyway, he, a few weeks ago, he tried to get into one of our ranch houses, and there was, the girls were there and they were scared. And I'd called the cops, told them how to get there. It's off a dirt road, and we got there first. And there was guns pulled. When we're 5 heated dudes and 3 of us have guns. And he's coming at me. He's like, shoot me. You gonna shoot me? And he's like, from me to you. But he turned and looked over his shoulder at one of the other cowboys, and I butt stroked him with a shotgun. And I mean, I beat him up pretty bad. And he's a big dude. And we ended up zip tying him and waiting until the cops got there. And one of the cops missed a turn, was hauling ass, missed their turn by a little bit, and just smashed the cop car cruiser into this big fence post. Like nothing wrong. There's sacks of cement down there. Oh, it was a Wild West day. Crazy Sunday afternoons. So where we are is just the homeless are kind of invading, and then like crime's kind of up. There's a lot of ag out there still, but the town itself is really being inundated with it. There's trains that pass, and so you got to cross the railroad tracks, and then it's like a mile of dirt road to get to the foothills. Well, they do shift change there a lot, so the trains will stop. And there's been like train robberies out there quite a bit. We've caught them several times. They'll go in when the trains are stopped, throw a bunch of stuff off, and then wait till the trains leave, and they come back and pick it up. My guys have caught them and, run them off in a very cowboy way, ask them to leave. If you can imagine how that looks. Yeah. So, yeah, we've had quite a few of the whoop-de-doos going through it. But at the end of the day, like, we're cowboys. It's Western out West. And what we do, it's not only for us and our way of life, but now seeing how many people we're helping that are healthy, that we can help be healthy, that we can, I'm not saying we're saving them, but like one steak at a time, one special needs kid at a time. I feel like we're in the right place at the right time. God's put us there, and we're going to do whatever we have to do. And the more information we can get out there, and I know the world's full of disinformation, right? The problem is we got hit with it since we were kids looking at the food pyramid.
Oh, yeah.
So the more solid, the more transparency we can have on the ranch, and once steaks are coming off and everything else, so people know exactly where their food's coming from. I feel like the transparency, everyone telling their story to know who, like, if you buy Santa Carota Beef, you're getting beef from Justin and Mike Pettit and our Pettit family. That's us. And more voices to confirm it. Yeah, I've been on there. Like the gal from Austin, she's Lindsay de Aguila. She's Animal-Based Bay. So she's awesome. Love her. She's been out a couple times to the ranch. She makes a big deal to see every corner of it, every cow, make sure no stone is unturned, because she said, I have an audience that I have to report to too. So not everyone can be on the ranch tour, but as long as you're doing your podcast, she's coming out and filming and letting the world know that, hey, I've vetted these guys, I've verified them. They're the real deal. And what they say they're doing, they're actually doing.
Word of mouth is huge.
Word of mouth is huge. I mean,
especially right now.
How many history stories were told word of mouth before we could type them out? Yeah. Now people are I think there's so much fake news and information out there, but I do think our brains are being trained for it. I turned the VP debate on the other night, and the first question they asked, they literally steered it toward it's okay, like that that foreign aid is good, like that they worded it in a way that they made the audience automatically assume that.
Yeah.
Well, I'd pick that up, but I'm like, well, what if we all don't agree on that?
Yep.
Like, what if we're done with Ukraine right now? We should be looking at North Carolina. We should be looking at Florida. We've got tired firefighters out in the Western United States right now. Those guys, I was at Hurricane Katrina for a month, and I fought a lot of fire. And those guys know how to manage ICS, Incident Command Systems, and a third-year hotshot could go in and set up something over a town and say, this is who's in charge of different divisions. This is who's ordering food. This is but anyone who knows how to handle natural disasters in rural America right now is tied up in Wyoming, Idaho, California. The Western United States is burning. They're tired. They're not taken care of. And we're sending money to other countries. And I feel that like that conversation is being had more now.
For sure. Absolutely.
So, I mean, I don't know what, like, someone stands up and makes us, this is a democracy. We can vote it out. We can vote with our dollars. And the A team that's coming, I feel like, with Make America Healthy, I'm cheering it on so much.
Same.
Like, because I've seen kids with vaccine injuries. I've seen moms. I went and had a beer with my buddy I hadn't seen in years. He travels all over. He grows vegetables. I hadn't seen him. He goes, man, I took my kids to get their vaccines. They're twin girls I just had. And they said there's 7 different, one's oral and 6 is being an injection at one time. He goes, well, they're twins. They're lighter. He goes, well, this is just how we do it. He said, well, some kids are born at 10 pounds and you're going to hit mine with 7 different doses at 6 pounds. Said he packed the girls up and walked out, grabbed the car seats, walked out the door. And he goes, I wasn't even anti-vax before that, but we are getting to the point where this is asinine. Like, and I really feel there's a movement of parents to stop it. God bless Texas. Man, my kids rode the bus. They've always had to do private schools and hide from their vaccine stuff. We got exemptions because all my kids were preemies. Got vaccine exemptions. They're riding the bus. They're doing great at Texas public schools. Thank you, Texas, for everything that you are doing. There's so much available resources, from this podcast to the treatment center where my daughter's at. This state is still embracing freedom so much, and I'm so happy and grateful. And like, I'm not like a transplant California. I'm still a visitor here, and I abide by Texas laws, and I'm just so happy for it because I feel like our freedom of choice, especially in the medical world, the food world, they have slowly, incrementally been taken away.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's why I'm so on the topic of milk. That's why I'm a huge proponent of it. We should have the freedom to choose between, I don't even want to call it raw milk. I just want to call it milk because that's what it is. I want it to have the freedom to choose between milk and pasteurized milk. And the fact that
they're trying to make it illegal, or it has been, that's wild to me. When I was a kid, I grew up we were poor. Like, I lived in more mobile homes than a mobile home park. And, but we had this like little double wide on a couple acres, and my mom drove a 65 Chevy dump truck, and would haul carrots to people we would sell to or put them in our backyard. And we had a tractor, and my mom would do it when my dad was at the fire station, or he would do it, and load like pickup trucks for backyard people feeding carrots to their animals. And one of the guys, we would trade for milk like twice a month, once a week, twice, every other week, whenever we needed it. And he had his own cows he milked. And as a kid, that's all I knew. And we would put these big jars in the fridge, and the cream would rise to the top. We'd skim it off. My brother and I would just play catch with it in this other jar, right? You just got to shake it up, right? Stir it. I found out later you can put it in a blender and it turns into butter too. But we would roll it around and play catch. And then the milk that wasn't part of the cream, that's what we drank. It tasted different than grocery store stuff. But so much, I would go to my friend's house and they're drinking like the non-fat or 2%, and it just tasted like water to me.
Yeah, now
I've never had that in my life.
Skim milk is disgusting.
Yeah. So tell me about because I'm in the beef world, and I want to know all I can about the raw milk and why you think that it's better, or what you feel that the pasteurization is doing, and that the health issues you want to get away from. Because I haven't even gone down that rabbit hole far enough. I've just been down mine,
Well, my biggest issue is the fact we've been lied to on why it was pasteurized in the first place. And because it's always, we're always told it'll make us sick and die, that we'll catch listeria and E. coli and all this, which is technically true. But from 1998 to 2018, we had 0 recorded deaths from raw milk. not too long ago, there was 10 recorded deaths from listeria caused by plant-based milk that happened in Canada. I think it was either silk or I can't remember the exact plant milk, which technically in the 1800s, people were dying from raw milk, but the context is always missing. And this is what's so infuriating, hilarious, and fascinating all together. So as the Industrial Revolution happened, people moved to bigger cities. So take New York City, for example. These cities were already very unsanitary, all full of diseases. There was no cars, so everyone was in a horse and buggy. Literal horse shit everywhere, and where all that is flies and more disease. It had no sanitation. So you take that into account, and then you take into account the War of 1812 between us and Britain ended, and because of that, they stopped supplying the whiskey for us. And so during that time, a lot of whiskey distilleries propped up. I can't remember, I think it was 6,000 to 7,000 distilleries in New York City. And because of that, then the economics became somewhat difficult. And so to try to keep profits, they tried to start supplying milk. And so they would attach dairy cows behind these distilleries within the confinements. I mean, it was literally like a concrete jungle like this. And they fed them these nasty used grain distilleries just to become more efficient and up the production of milk, which it worked. But the milk that produced, it was called swill milk. It was literally blue pus-filled milk, and they supplied the communities with that. And so at that time, the infant mortality rates skyrocketed. And that's technically true. The milk that they supplied did kill a lot of people. What's missing is the fact that the milk that they sold was disgusting. They didn't treat the animals well at all. They had no pastures. There's plenty of images of cows to where they just hung them on harnesses because they were so sick they couldn't even stand up, and they'd still milk them. And so that's why they were looking for options to pasteurize, because if you compare that to rural America, no one was dying at all. And so this missing piece is never talked about. You can go back and track. There's old New York Times articles talking about this and people speaking for keeping raw milk. But there was lobbyists again, and this is essentially trying to, the Rockefellers came into play later on, and they had huge influence of that as well. And so to me,
I like where you're going with that though.
Yeah,
I'm with you.
But that's just so infuriating that's just so, we've been so lied to about that simple thing as to literally why we pasteurize milk in the first place. But then you look at the vitamin mineral content, the fact that this also plays in effect with the whole science, trust the science movement. We've become so sterilized and so afraid of germs and everything with COVID. I mean, yesterday, going back to the doctor, I had my blood work done, and I literally clicked the person that was giving me the IVs or whatnot, had me input my email address, and after I typed, she gave me hand sanitizer immediately. I was like, "Are you serious? We're that so scared of germs and whatnot? Bacteria, there's so much bacteria in our gut. There's technically E. coli in our gut. Not all E. coli is bad. So with the fact that raw milk has a lot of beneficial bacteria and enzymes, pasteurization does denature some of these denatures a lot of the beneficial bacteria. It denatures some of the actual vitamins and minerals. And then there's some, it's not fully, I'm not going to make the full claim on this because I was initially, but now with the whole lactose intolerance thing, with pasteurization, it completely destroys the enzyme lactase. And I've seen this in grocery stores now to where I forgot the brand of butter, but I've seen it at Whole Foods to where it says lactose-free butter. And if you look at the butter, it shows the steps. One, they pasteurized it, and two, they re-add the enzyme lactase. So it's kind of just even showing us in the face of how this you're able to digest it. But that's never talked about either. Because a lot of folks that are technically lactose intolerant with pasteurized dairy, one is because we already have a messed up gut. Two, the fact that a lot of pasteurized dairy, because again, with Alexander Family Farms, they don't sell raw milk. This is why I'm excited to talk to them about this, because I'm curious what they have to say, because there's all kinds of types of pasteurization now. There's fully pasteurized, low VAT. I mean, a lot of the big dairy stuff, it's really disgusting because with pasteurization now, they don't have to care about the quality and care they give to the cows, the feed. They feed them because then they just pasteurize it and kills all the nastiness that had beforehand. So there's a lot that plays into that, but then also a lot of folks that switch to raw dairy all of a sudden can start digesting it and just like, whoa, that's never talked about either. But then lastly, I really want to talk about this too, because with food, food is medicine, but also everybody's body is different. So the fact that you might digest raw dairy, raw cow dairy, someone else might not be able to. But also there is goat dairy and sheep's. A lot of that is way more digestible for folks that might not have that. So that's another thing that's not discussed enough, is the fact that it's not all or nothing with food. You have to understand what your body can digest. Our body gives us so many signals that we blatantly ignore or don't even realize. Another thing with skin issues, like for example, dairy causes acne and all kinds of other skin issues. Dermatologists never talk about your nutrition. Again, that's another industry. They just prescribe you all kinds of things. Like my mother, she had a dermatologist her whole life because she had really bad psoriasis. They never once talked about what she ate. They always prescribed her all kinds of bullshit, all kinds of shampoos. It took me a really long time to even remember that. The fact that, because I had a dermatologist too, because I had really dry skin, but it was because of what I was putting in my body. And I just went off a really huge tangent, but...
You're good. You know what they used to do in the old days for the kids that were lactose intolerant? They'd get a goat. Raw goat's milk, like just salt.
Yeah.
That would wipe out most kids, you know? Yeah. Now, there are some super, super sensitive guts, and that's tough, you know? But that was, in the old days when the kids couldn't drink milk, they get a goat, milk a goat. What's your shelf life on the raw milk you buy?
I mean, I drink a lot of it, so... I've never...
Could you tell me, like, what is...
That's actually a good question. I don't know off the top of my head.
Because that's going to be the biggest pushback.
This is also going to the educational piece too, though, because we are so used to expecting, when we walk in the grocery store, all the food that we buy is going to be there. Every season, that's going to be there. And B, that it's all preserved for a long shelf life. So this is why we're so disconnected from our food. We don't understand these things anymore that our ancestors knew for our whole lives.
Yeah. Well, man, we're bringing produce in year round now. It's grown in South America, Mexico, South Africa, and that's okay and it's good. And most people don't even care as long as they can get grapes any time of year. Or before, there was only like a table grape season.
So a couple days ago, I went to Whole Foods to buy apples because I just need some apples. I didn't even look at the label until I started eating one. It was from New Zealand.
Right.
Like, what? Why right. Apples from New Zealand?
So, and here's I've been around a lot of big ag companies here, and they have too much to lose to break the rules. There's bad apples in every bunch, and there's rats in every industry, right? And they eventually get caught. But the big guys, like, no. I just did a organic tour Thursday, with Cal Organic. Awesome. Loved it. Wasn't supposed to be that hot in October. And they're like, look, there's some bugs on this field. And we might, if we sprayed it, it wouldn't be organic anymore. But we have other bugs that will combat them. We have different watering ways. And like, we're going to use all of organic techniques we can and only the organic stuff we could put on here. But they're dealing with Costco's and Whole Foods and big grocers. They're not going to risk that. But what about the ones that are coming from other countries? So you might have the U.S. think of oil business. I think the U.S. makes the cleanest oil. Like where I come from, they got guys out there with electric weed whackers weeding around oil wells, and everything is how clean and green can we get out here in the oil patch because we're already oil and that's what they want to see. We should be modeling after that. We are the cleanest energy producing country, but yet we go buy from other countries that we have no regulations over. So think of all of the organic regulations here. Are you going to trust an organic piece of fruit, an organic strawberry from the US as much as the same as you're going to trust one from Mexico or Peru? You weren't there. It's not the same USDA inspectors. It's not any of that. So, that's also part of the seasonal food and knowing your farmer, like Absolutely. Knowing. So, My mother-in-law, she's at a HEB show right now here in Austin, and she's going to drive home with me. She sells those cotton candy grapes. Have you seen those?
Mm-hmm.
Really good. Love, and the grapery that she works for has helped us a lot as far as marketing, how to kind of stay out of the commodity world, kind of pave your own way. And they've been great to lean on. And they literally they are down in other countries. They just started bringing in from other countries. They are down there all the time, vetting, going through every warehouse, making sure that is exactly, no one's cutting corners.
Mm-hmm.
But there are so many people out there that will just buy a load of whatever, and if it makes it across the border, we're selling it, and it makes it to the food supply. No one knows. And we've all seen the crazy videos of guys with the backpacks on,
Mm-hmm.
Somebody did it, and somebody took the video, so who the hell was it? But yeah, the milk thing, that is going to be the challenge, and shelf life's the challenge. They're trying to spray citrus right now with reused citrus peel. There's a lot of things out there that are kind of funky that for shelf life. Well, that's the biggest one. How do you get an apple from New Zealand to here and still be fresh? Shelf life's the issue.
Well, for me, we shouldn't even be getting apples from New Zealand.
It's true. Yeah.
But going back to the milk topic too, so we have 10 minutes left, and some other things that I didn't mention is, so I had Mark McAfee on my podcast too, and learned a lot through him, just how good it is for your immune system. Because also I completely forgot, a lot of pasteurized dairy, a lot of it, folks actually end up having asthma problems and other immune issues. With raw dairy, it's the complete opposite. It's so good for your immune system, and there's a lot of research behind this all. Even from the 1800s, the French did it was called the raw milk cure. You can look that up. And they used it for all kinds of issues. And there's a lot of research on how it helped build that. It really builds your immune system. And then lastly, the one thing I wanted to add too is the fact that it's a complete protein. It's got great fats and carbs and all the beneficial vitamins, minerals, and bacteria. I mean, just having a glass of that is so incredible for you.
It's like the local honey, right? Helps with your allergies.
Yep.
You go all the way back to biblical times when Moses was promised the land of milk and honey. Where those were healing recipes then too, right? Now they're a commodity, and it's pegged to the almighty dollar, which is constantly fluctuating because we print money and it's a mess. But yes, the food was healing medicines for so long. And we've gone from that.
I will full blatantly say, to me, that is the number one reason why it's illegal, is because the people at play understand how good it is and the history of it, but they've used so much propaganda, and they've used all the government institutions like the CDC and the FDA to really disinform us, essentially.
Can you freeze raw milk?
Mm-hmm. Because, for example,
what does it taste like afterwards? Does it taste different?
It does taste different, but still really good. Because, for example, there's a local goat farm that I've bought to where I bought 10 gallons and 8 of it was frozen.
Okay.
And then I would just, whenever I'd finished a couple gallons, I would bring 2, put them in the fridge, let it thaw, and drink it, and it was great.
Okay.
I don't, off the top of my head, I can't give a good answer if that changes anything. I don't think it does.
Well, I mean, if there's any bacteria that can't withstand a negative 10 degree, you might kill something that's not pasteurized.
Yeah.
We're going to talk with a frozen guy here in a little bit, but
that's also the last thing too, with like the FDA, they do so many corrupt things. I don't know if you saw the Amos Miller stuff in Pennsylvania.
I saw they went and busted a farm or something, right?
And then there's also happened again in Michigan. So it's called Nurse Cooperative, and they had all of the legal documents and everything correct. And FDA came and seized $90,000 worth of raw dairy. And I remember seeing the video of whenever they seized it, the 2 FDA agents, so cowardly, they weren't even the ones dumping. They just sat there and just watched.
Yeah, and it's sad because that could go to calves, it could go to something.
It was $90,000 worth.
That's a lot of money. These guys, so when we feed onions or garlic, because when I sell them to the dairies, they'll feed like their dry cows or their heifers, anything that's not going into the milk string. Because man, if you lose a load of milk, it's a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anybody should be penalized for selling milk. I shouldn't be penalized for selling a live cow off of my ranch before it goes to be harvested. If someone wants to go do it themselves in their backyard, fine. Someone wants to go to a dairy farm and say, hey, can I buy a couple pills of milk.
Mm-hmm.
In the United States of America, that should not be illegal.
Yeah, and that's why I always point out the ridiculousness. So another example, over 3 million Americans drink raw milk annually. Where's all of the deaths? Where's all of the hospitalizations? It's not happening. I mean, some get sick. You're obviously, I mean, you have a chance of getting, it's always so funny that with like all of the listeria and E. coli and all of that, but then they don't talk about the produce that causes listeria and E. coli. They don't talk about the plant milk that literally killed 10 people from listeria. Or the fact that...
Or the ground beef recalls that they have no... Like, there are so many different sources of meat on a ground beef recall. That is wild. That is... Man, I've been to some conferences about that. And thank God we went the direction we did. Because for us, it's small batches. It's lot numbers. And we can trace it all the way through, and because it's just like one animal, we're doing it times 35 or 40.
Yeah.
And so when you do ground beef, all the raw material, it's a whole separate deal. There's a lot of traceability. There's salmonella testing constantly. So everything has to be labbed, and we have COAs, certificate of an analysis. So any raw material that's going to go to ground beef has to be labbed. And then there's batch numbers, and then that's the traceability for it. So, I mean, I feel like you could totally test milk before it leaves for salmonella.
Mark McAfee's a huge... I mean, that's why he found Raw Milk Institute, too, so he could share this knowledge and so people can do these tests before that. He's also been very outspoken because the media is coming after him a lot. There was supposedly an outbreak from his dairy, which turned out to not be true, but if you look... Whenever that happened, there's so many articles that just immediately, because they want to take it out. Again, the CDC information from 1998 to 2018 is 0 deaths attributed to raw milk. And then going back to the fact that millions of Americans, but people don't, we're just sold on these lies that have been shoved down our throats for the fact that we don't think for ourselves. But once you start actually questioning these things, you realize how ridiculous it actually is.
Yeah. It's a very conformist society that we're trying to break out of right now.
Which is why I love to make America, this is why it gives me so much hope, because a lot of people are breaking out of it.
Oh, it's a dream team. Yeah. Like, you literally, Kennedy took the Teamsters with him to Trump now. And yeah, but they're doing it for the right reasons. And so, when I said our story, I left a lot of wild stuff out, but you kind of have to be an outlaw to fight the big powers that be, and not be scared to go against Goliath. And we have a culture of sit at your desk, get in line, from the time you're brought up in school, but then on the playground, everyone bullies the kid who's different.
Yeah.
That kid ends up going on to do great things sometimes. We should be, because no two people in this world are alike, that means everyone's different. And so, what is your purpose here on this earth? If that is my question to myself constantly, and I really know this. And here in the last few months, it's been solidified that wow, I'm in the special needs realm with these kids, and we're helping them, and then we're doing good things. And there's a lot of parents that aren't trusting the doctor results, aren't trusting modern medicine. They're looking at things like hyperbaric oxygen chambers. They're looking at different therapies that their insurance won't cover. Insurance will cover drugs all day long. But anything that gives a result, a positive one, seems to be weeded out, shown as misinformation all over, whether it's the food or the medicine, or however we're healing ourselves. Look at North Carolina. They're going to heal themselves without the government. We don't need them. And the whole world's watching it. And we're doing it right now with food. You're doing it with food. The more people we can show, I think the better it is, because now we're going to know that we're not alone in the world, and that we were the outlaws kind of pushing against it. But now there's a band of outlaws that are kind of taking this thing over. And once you can kind of carve out your corner of the market, you're not going anywhere. And I think that's what we've stood up and said. I mean, like you're saying, Callie and Casey, in Congress, they're saying enough's enough. We're stopping the bleeding. It stops here. And not only does it stop here, we're going to help elect people that actually push back and start taking our own health back, because we need to be able to make these decisions. My kids were kicked out of schools for not being vaccinated, but they wanted to vaccinate them when they were still not even supposed to be born yet. Like, you want to give my kids, what was it, the hepatitis shot when their due date isn't for 60 more days, but it's your hospital protocol. They got a 10-pound kid over here and my 4-pound kid here, and they're getting the same stuff. Not happening. So that woke up. My wife woke up to that, and it's just been an uphill battle, but a good one. Like, we've gathered some troops with it along the way, and now I'm finding them in Austin. I'm finding them in DC and in Wyoming, and the beef people want to help too.
Absolutely.
And that is the biggest thing. I know there's a lot of like, hey, grandpa did it this way. They're going to go to a feedlot, and it makes money. We know how to make money with it. But when it comes, like, are you part of the solution or the problem? And I think like, cattle ranchers are problem solvers. Every single day, you are in the middle of nowhere and you got to make something work with or without the right part. And if we can help and problem solve, I think that we are cheering it on. And this carnivore revolution is, man, I can't cheer it on enough. I'm tipping my hat and I'm applauding and I'm blowing my horn. And like, that's a rising tide that's going to raise all ships across the board. But now ranchers are paying attention to where their calves are going.
Absolutely.
That's a good thing.
Well, thank you so much for joining. This was an amazing conversation. I guess to end this, if there's any last things you'd like to plug or share, now would be the time.
No, I think we're going to do it again soon. So I'm excited about it. Sorry if I got long-winded.
No, this was great.
There's a lot in a little bit of time. And I just think that I'm most excited to tell our story. And I know every single rancher out there, whether they're 8th generation or first time trying it, they all want to tell their story too. And the more that we can tell our story, the more transparent we are organically and naturally. And that just lets our end user, our consumer, our customer know who they're getting their beef from. Because right now they don't, and that is scaring the hell out of them. So just being able to tell our story so the world knows who we are and let them know that we're here to answer any questions, I think that's plenty, because we look forward to answering every question we can and educating.
Perfect. Thank you.
You got it.
Visit www.theregenaissance.co to learn more.